Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
Doing great, man. How are you doing, Derek? Very
I'm
good.
great. My friend Mike Lunny and friend of the podcast, Mr. Jay Lester. It's great to see you again, sir.
Absolutely.
Trust trust everything's going well in academia.
It is. This
Mhm.
is finals week.
Awesome.
Things are
And
winding down.
I noticed y'all marched a parade recently in Dallas.
We marched 4 parades
I was
last
going
week,
to say it was more than one.
but yeah, we
One of
did
them
the
looked pretty
Dallas
cold.
holiday parade.
How cool. Um, well, man, we are in the middle of this is season 2. So welcome to season 2. And this is actually part 2 of an episode that we started based on a question that we got about building and or remodeling, maybe adding on to the rehearsal space as you have it, whether that's the band hall, orchestra hall, performing arts center, etc. And so in the first part, we talked to 2 friends, Lois Duder up in Wichita Falls and Dane Richardson in Holiday, and kind of the takeaways. There's a lot there. If you haven't listened to it yet, friends, you probably need to go check that out. But kind of the takeaways from that first part was, number one, make sure you are part of the process from the get-go. It's hard to jump in the middle of that and convince everybody that things might need to be different. The second thing that I think was important that they said is you need to actually sit down and consider all of the things you do and all of the things you have, or maybe I should say that in reverse. Sure, you need space for the things you have, but you need to make sure you've got space for all the things you do, whether that's winter guard or jazz band or percussion ensemble or all the stuff that you have to store and all the stuff that you do. You need to make sure you have the space for it. And then I think the third big point is that you really have to always be on the lookout. It's not a one time, but you're always on the lookout for, hey, this might not work. Mike Lenny told us a story of uh, they they ran ductwork for his AC and heating, and then they figured out they were trying to go through a firewall, so the company just kind of bolted it to the wall and walked away. So it was kind of a terminal duct. But those were kind of the 3 big things in part 1 that we talked about. So, Mr. Lester, I just kind of want to throw that at you. Agreements, some other things you might add from a teaching standpoint, from the teacher that's going to be using that rehearsal space. Um, Anything else that you say, or anything that you would say, absolutely, they were right about that?
You know, Derek, there's absolutely everything I've heard so far is just right on point. You've got to be involved right from the beginning, and you got to have the right attitude to get a seat at the table.
That's probably important. Good point.
It is, and whether that be through your fine arts director or if the band director is going to go through the principal, if it's a smaller school, and if they don't have a fine arts director, they just need to make sure that their input is valued right from the start. If you try to catch the middle of the project after they've already finished the drawings, you're not going to get a lot of success, not going to have a lot of success at that point.
Right. Okay. And to their last point, I always consider the punch list one of the final processes, but I guess if you are anticipating doing this here or doing that there, I think one of them mentioned that they had a room that they had set up and designated for doing color guard and winter guard, but it was a sloped ceiling, so you could only use half the room because that back slope was too low and they couldn't throw, flags in the air or do some of that stuff. Were you an advocate for, I don't want to say just bird dogging it all the time, but you got to be aware of what's going on and walk and keep that stuff fresh in your mind. You agree?
I do. It's interesting you said that about the ceiling height. You've got to look at blueprints not just from a 2-dimensional standpoint, but a 3-dimensional.
There you go.
And one thing that I put into practice was you've got to identify where your outlets go, where your AV outlets go. If you want them in the floor, you've got to get that in really early because that goes in the slab.
Right.
And all that conduit has to go in. It's really cheap during construction to put conduit in the wall before the wall is closed.
Yeah.
After the wall is closed, it's just near impossible.
The cake is baked.
Right. So you've got to do all that planning ahead of time. Same with your AV, and that includes whether you're going to have a projector or TV panels and AV system, and you're going to want to make sure you have Bluetooth and everything that you need. Now, if you go in and say, we've got to have a CD player, nowadays, that's just probably not going to happen.
A what?
Yeah,
That's
it is important to have some kind of computer and Bluetooth so that you can, and then just options where you can plug something in or connect.
It makes sense. Okay, so I'm gonna and by the way, we are compiling and creating a downloadable list from the contributors that we've had for this. And I know, Mr. Lester, you were one of those contributors. As you go back over your list, is there anything else from a teacher or director standpoint that you think it's important to consider now before the process starts?
Well, one thing that I talked to Mike about on the phone was that you have to make sure you identify the spaces that you need. If you want them in separate areas or rooms, like a uniform room, instrument room, percussion room, color guard room, and then office spaces that oversee those spaces, and then also practice rooms, and how many is really practical to put in. Whether you're going to hire a company like Winger or another one to do soundproofing and buy their product, or if you're going to trust the architect. And then you've got to look at things like your noise reduction factor, and what kind of doors and the noise soundproofing that goes into the door or to the sheetrock. There's different grades of sheetrock. I don't know if y'all know that.
Yeah.
So there's
And
some
all
of it,
baffling in the
and then
conditioning ducts.
and then baffling, and then things that I always tell people, that something you can look at in blueprints and ask our architects, does that wall go all the way to the roof deck? Because if it doesn't, then if it just goes right above that drop ceiling, then you're going to get all of that sound bleed over
Right, you
from
just
one room to
eliminated
the
your
next.
soundproofing, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way most construction is
Yeah.
built, and our facilities definitely look different on the inside. Then one thing that I always tell people is make good use of your space. If you've got offices with a drop ceiling, say what's going in above that, and then deck it and use it for storage. Doesn't have to be ADA compliant if you're using it for storage.
Okay, that's good to know. And it's one of those important things. Building for storage is probably a lot easier than building for ADA compliancy.
Absolutely.
If I
Yeah,
said
when
that delicately
people-
now.
I think Mike's old band hall over at Wiley, I think they're getting ready to redo that.
Yeah, that's kind of
But you
impetus
see that-
that started.
You see that second level with the little balcony and little rooms off of it, and there's no elevator.
Yeah, it's all on the blueprints as storage.
Yeah, that's just not the way you don't spit out anymore.
Yeah, it was kind of a loophole. Not sure how ethical it was, but
Let me
it's
ask you-
meant to. There's no ADA on it.
Mr. Lester, one of the conversations we had was instrument storage in the band hall with you or instrument storage in its own room. There seems to be opinions either way. Do you have one or the other? Do you care?
You know, I've kind of gone back and forth. One thing that you're not given is carte blanche on the amount of square footage you get.
Yeah.
And then you have to look and see how much space can I give up. Sometimes it's worth it to put the lockers in the room. Other times you might have some space where you can utilize and make use of some space for an instrument room. Although one thing that you got to watch out for is monitoring those spaces.
Yeah.
Get ready to say glass doors or windows.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, a lot of times those rooms are packed full of lockers with islands, and there's lots of hiding places. That's one advantage to having them in the room is you can see everything.
And I think one consideration too is if it's a smaller school, I would love to have them in the room because it's one band that meets. But if you have 3 concert bands that meet at the same time, I would rather have a central instrument storage where the kids aren't slamming doors and coming through the main hall. And so forth. So there's lots of considerations. I don't think one or the other is better. It's just what fits your needs the best. But Jay's right, man. It's talk about monitoring. My band hall at Wiley, the brass room and the percussion room was definitely something I had to monitor continually because it was hidden. The kids are kids,
And a lot of times you'll see, architects will put one giant office, and everybody loves the idea of that for conferencing.
Hmm.
But when you have to have that private conversation with a parent or a student, or you have to talk on the phone, and it's just
chaos around you.
in polling directors, I think they would rather have a small space that's theirs
Mm-hmm.
that has a phone and a computer that they can do their work in, that kind of conference work. Now, if you need a conference, you can go in the music library
Yeah.
and just get around the table.
Well, I will say that I have seen locally, we have a high school where the head director has an office and then a larger office that was probably intended as a practice area at one point. But there's two more in there. Two more directors share that. So the director has some personal space. But I would think that there's even times where you're just like, I just need to be alone. Let me process what we just went through. Everybody get out of here. So I see the value of that. Absolutely. Okay. Well, I'm sure other things will come up, but I want to make sure I give you time, sir. Can you change hats? As an administrator, as a fine arts coordinator who has overseen or been a part of it from the other side, it's amazing to me that a lot of times, for instance, we've had band directors who retire and came to work for us. And so the perspective changes a bit when they're selling as opposed to when they were buying. And so I don't know if that holds true in the perspective of I'm a teacher asking for all of this as opposed to I'm an administrator seeing what I can give you. Is there thoughts that understand our audience is basically the teachers, but as they approach their administration, are there things you can say, let me give you some hints how you could approach some of this stuff?
I'll give you a good example. When I first started in administration, I was working in Victoria, and I'd already been a part of several construction projects in Allen when I was working there, but moved to Victoria and we had 7 major projects. And I was involved with 6 of them. The only one I didn't have any involvement with was the natatorium, the swimming pool. So the other ones were all high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, and a performing arts center. And so I looked at the blueprint. I'm like, there's no way to get from the backstage to the front indoors. You have to go outside.
That's a problem.
So
Yeah.
we started looking at that. The prices were a little high at that time. But then after that, we saw a plummet in construction prices. So they said, okay, start over. So I drove all over the state and I went to every facility I could think of that would be a good example. Standalone facilities, some that were in high schools. And I said, what do you love about your place? And what do you hate about it? And what do you wish you would have done differently if you had to do it over? And I got to see all kinds of examples. And I took all this data and basically drew it out on a legal pad.
Yeah.
Took it to the architect, said, can you do something like this? And boy, they did a really great job of including it, everything I wanted. Now, did I get everything I wanted? Couldn't afford everything. But we got, I'd say 95% of it. And then that 5%, we made sure that we built the facilities so that they could be expanded or added on to later, because you have to look to the future.
And I think a really good point that Jay made was go and look at other facilities, because I guarantee him what he did, that there was expansion available, but also there was no wasted space. How many times have you gone into a band hall or a facility and you looked and there's like 100 square feet that is useless?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing you can do with it. There's like a staircase over it and there's nothing. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but you'll know it when you see it. But go and look at some places, and then ask the band director or choir or orchestra director, what is not good here?
2 points that I would harken back to real quick, and I want your agreement, Mr. Lester. The administrator is not going to mind if you ask for everything that you want. I mean, that's kind of part of the process. You need to ask for everything that you think you need and or want. But secondly, Mike, I'm going to remind you that you brought up like the electrical and the fire prevention. And if you don't plan for that in your plans, they'll put it wherever they want to. And
Yeah,
it
if you don't
might
plan for the
always be the
mechanical
most
rooms.
convenient. So
And the one item that everybody leaves out and they don't think about is the IT headroom.
Yes.
And then they come in and put it in a closet or a storage room,
Next to the desk
room, or in an office. And it's this loud piece of equipment that's buzzing all the time. It's up and usually it's elevated. Those kind of facilities and places, they just never think to put them in.
Yep.
So you have to include that in your planning. It's one that gets left off every time.
So back to that first question, Mr. Lester, as an administrator, you may smile when you see the request list, but you still want to see it all.
Yeah,
Don't
and you
not
might
put something
say-
on your list.
Yeah. So, here in Abilene, when we just finished doing some facilities for band, orchestra and choir, and it was kind of about an 8-year project, and took some old CTE space and converted it to music facilities. And one thing I did was I went to Midland, Odessa, all over, just different facilities in the Metroplex, and I compared square footage. How much is your total footprint, and how much square footage do you have? And then I tried to fit all of the spaces that we needed: uniform room, percussion room, instrument storage, if necessary, a library, office space, ensemble room, and in some cases, maybe a second band hall or percussion performance room. And I tried to put that all in there and bring equity between the two schools, but then also make sure that we're within the square footage of our footprint. Now, that was a little bit different kind of a task, because here's what you have, now make it work, versus new construction, where they may tell you, okay,
Pour slab.
yeah, before they pour the slab or do anything, you're just on drawings, and they're going to tell you you're going to get approximately this much square footage. And then you get to play with it a little bit.
Cool.
So I would say compare and make sure that you have the square footage first when you're talking to that initial meeting with architects and you're thinking about getting some blueprints drawn, and figure out what spaces are important to you. And you ask for the moon, and then you're going to just realize you're going to have some cuts.
Sure.
Everybody has cuts.
And that's a good reason to ask for everything.
Now,
If
I'll
things
give you
cut, they got fat to cut.
that.
If you only ask for what you absolutely have to have, they're going to cut something.
Yeah. More than likely, you're going to see less square footage, and you're going to see some of those features that will go away. I had a pit lift in that performing arts center, and it was really cool. I learned at that time there was some kind of a chain driven, a screw lift, and hydraulic, and they were all about $250,000. And so that got cut from the project, but we put the infrastructure in underneath, and it was just not mechanical, but physical. So the maintenance guys would come over, take them about 3 hours to change it up or down.
Okay. So it wasn't a big production in the middle of something, but then
No.
come and set it.
But you couldn't use it as an elevator either.
Right.
So there's things like that. There's tricks of the trade that you can use.
Yes.
But make sure that you have everything in mind first. These days, ice machines are important.
Oh gosh, yes.
Golf cart storage, booster storage, prop storage. Now, how much props, and it's kind of like theater spaces. They fill up the storage you give them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you give them 1,000 square feet, they're going to put 1,200 square feet worth of stuff in there. If you give them 2,000, they're going to fill it up. So, there's a happy medium trying to figure out what to do with all those marching band props and how to store them in the off season.
Yeah. I think most of the directors I've talked to, Derek, with propage, they do it on how many props and things do they use in the course of 2 years? And what things are standard, like rampage, backdrops, side drops, and then everything else they sell. And because it's cheaper to buy and sell props and trade. There's some Roman columns that have been all over West Texas. They've been in about 15 different productions, and they just move from school to school. And so I agree with Jay. It's just like a teenager. You give them enough room, they'll fill it up, with
Well,
whatever. So
that's what you're saying. It's just almost like if you consider your home. When I lived in a smaller home, it was full. I thought, oh, great, I'm buying a larger home. I'm going to have a lot more room. I just filled it up with more stuff.
that's right.
It's just kind of how that works.
And you
So,
never know
okay.
what they might okay. I know some band halls where the head director has his own shower and his own bathroom.
I was going to actually ask
so
that.
and that's a nice luxury, but the school okayed it. So and the staff has their bathroom. Think about that. The head director has his bathroom or her bathroom. So go ahead and ask for it. And gives it, if nothing else, like we mentioned earlier, it gives them something to cut. So, well, Mr. Lundy, we just can't afford to do a shower and do all the plumbing and all this over here. Okay, well, just go ahead and cut that then.
All right. Okay, Mr. Lester, talk to us as an administrator. How do we approach our administration with, I'm going to give you two scenarios. A, in the beginning, to validate, what are you expecting to hear that makes you go, they really have thought about this and they wanted this, as opposed to this was just a light bulb that went off before they walked into my office. And number two, in the event, never happens, right, that we come up with oh my gosh, we didn't think about. How do we approach those situations?
Well, I'll give you a couple of good examples.
That's why we have you here. You are leadable.
When people say, and I know this has probably been mentioned, but we're going to have that door be larger than that.
Yeah.
Can't fit the instruments through that door. So that's one that may or may not be able to be adjusted. Anything you have that's a change, that's going to trigger, after the construction's approved and started, is called a change order. And change orders are very expensive.
Yeah, equals money.
The architect gets their cut for new drawings.
Yeah.
The general contractor, they get their cut. Then the subs get their cut. And then the materials. And then what do you do with the old stuff, and what will it take to modify the space?
Yeah.
So there might be, we're going to have to cut into that cinder block, and there might be asbestos in there if it's old construction. And then they've got to hire a test.
An abatement.
And then abatement. So sometimes when I was working on a project at Abilene High, and they said, well, we just want that door to be moved, a few feet over and make it a little bigger. That door, I said, that will cost about $8,000. They're like, how can that be? It's just a door.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, for one, it's a steel door, and that's cinder block around it, and that's a steel frame.
Yeah.
And there's asbestos in that wall, and you've got a light switch right there. That's electrical. So you've just brought in almost every trade possible.
Yeah.
They just don't understand that. And it's very expensive, and especially if it's in a construction project. So I would say initially, if the band, orchestra, choir director, music teacher can meet with their fine arts director or their principal and have an initial meeting, as soon as there's kind of an interest, there's word that they're going to have a construction project or a potential for a bond project or some funds that are going to be used to renovate a facility or build a new facility, and get all of this stuff in writing. And then before they meet with the architect, that way you could say, at least I presented my material.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to, like Mike said, it presents a chance for them to say, well, we can't do all of this. Well, there goes the instrument room. Now we'll just make the band hall a little bigger.
Yeah.
So that around the perimeter.
As long as it fits the footprint. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Well, you've got to make sure that volume of air is there in the main rehearsal room, because you can't change that later.
Yeah.
So here's a kind of a side question, and may just be redundancy, but that's who I am. As an administrator, are you expecting, once you get the initial input from the educator, are you expecting them to get out of the way and we just go forward? Or are you expecting them to still be actively involved in the process, and you're counting on them to be your eyes and ears on site because you can't be there all the time?
I guess that depends on
The person.
and it depends on their level of interest. And quite frankly, we have construction meetings on site. And we'll meet, let's say if this project is happening like at Abilene High, we'll meet in a room that's finished, and then we walk the project every week. And we get an update. You get plans, and they have timelines, progress, and you go see what's done. And that allows me, another set of eyes, to say, hey, that's not right. What's going on here? And at times, we found mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
And that allows them chance to fix what's not going right.
Okay. And I will say this too, having been involved in several different sides of this kind of, sometimes they mess up. You did your homework, you submitted it correctly, they just didn't do it right. But I've met so many people who are scared to say anything because they don't want to ruffle feathers, or they don't want the construction crew to go, how dare you? But that's kind of part of the process. I guess what I'm trying to say is everybody needs to have their eyes on it and go, that's not what we talked about. Or go back to the list and go, oh, it is what we talked about. My mistake.
You should not hesitate to speak up.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say.
It's no one else is going to advocate for you.
And I've got a question for you, Jay. Is there usually like one point person like you when you do it? Or do the contractors listen to the band director, choir director, orchestra director, fine arts? Or is that every project's different?
I'd say that it depends on the local
scope and the local.
So like in Victoria and Abilene, and in Allen, we had somebody who was designated from the school district as the point person.
Okay.
And that they would attend all the meetings.
So it always comes to you.
Usually it's your operations superintendent, and then they would invite the people to portions of the meeting that were directly involved. So if it's an athletic project, usually the athletic director would be there for their portion. And then fine arts director, principals usually were on site for those when they could make it. But no, we didn't have individual teachers at all of those. Occasionally we'd invite them to come and offer input or just review.
But if I'm a band director and I see a mistake, is it more proper for me to
Oh, yeah.
you?
Yeah.
Or I don't just get the general contractor and go, hey man, this is messed up.
Right.
Because that's what I'm asking too.
That's probably a little further along too.
Yeah.
And then once the project is getting near the finish, that we have the punch list.
Yes, yes.
In the old days, we'd have little blue pieces.
That's right, blue tape
all over the walls where any mistake was made.
Yeah.
Now it's done a little differently.
Okay.
So now the architect, they're responsible for the punch list. They go through and take photos of all the mistakes and then document them, and they're tied in with a line item that's an active spreadsheet.
Okay.
And as the item is corrected, then they fix it. So there might be a carpet mistake or a baseboard, electrical paint mistakes. You see all kinds of.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Gary, say technology's probably improved the blue tape process, although I don't know that it's not. My old man brain likes to see that tape come taken down when things get corrected. The less blue tape, you
have to look at the spreadsheet.
However, sometimes kids will come along and just
that's just help. All of a sudden, the mistake's been fixed. The kid.
And I can remember, being in Allen and saying, "Why is all this blue tape all over the wall?"
They collected it.
They never finished.
Oh, they never finished it.
So that's a good point. Here's another great point. Derek, you don't have this on the list, but the hardest thing to finish is the last 5% of a project. And it's when everything's done. At that point, it's not economical for the general contractor to leave 100 guys on site to finish. So they'll leave 2 guys with a hammer and a wheelbarrow. And it's their job to do 100 items on a punch list or 300 items. And it takes them months. And that whole just drags on and on. Basically, what I'm just telling you is to expect it
Yeah, and just live with it.
and live with it. Here's your warning. Be persistent, because if you're not,
They'll get
right slower, that last 2% will never be finished. The general contractor will generally walk away. They're just trying to wear you out so that you just go, I'm tired of this. Just pay the guy. Let's go.
I love it. The Quiet Part Out Loud by Mr. Lester.
But having been in construction before, I also am very familiar with question ask response from the construction guys that are left. I don't know.
I don't know.
All right.
My supervisor didn't tell me about
Yeah,
that.
that's right. It wasn't on the work order.
All right.
Or
We'll have to call so-and-so.
they moved him to another site.
Yeah, yeah.
And
He
they
doesn't work in here anymore.
he didn't work there anymore. We've got a new person.
I
Yeah,
love it.
I've seen it all.
I bet you have.
And especially at the tail end of projects, they'll move somebody
Yeah.
and then you get a new one and you have to bring them up to date. Oh, that brings up another good.
Oh, here we go.
Get everything in writing, because
Okay.
the people change. But if you have it in writing, at least they have something to go with.
Nice.
Because if you just get a verbal, oh, we'll take care of that, no problem, probably not going to happen.
Good point. I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have trusted them,
No,
which could be dangerous.
get it in writing.
Well, that's probably easier with technology now, but you know, and I think the western part of our state, at least, is still some of those people that are like, "Hey, my word's my word. It's solid." Sure, but can we write that down? It's not 30 years
Trust
ago.
but
It's not 50
verify.
years. There you go. Trust but verify.
Trust but verify.
Yeah, and who do you work with? You might be on site, you're talking to a construction supervisor, but it's your job to report it to the architect. Everything goes through the architect.
Okay. That's the point person. Okay. I didn't know that.
So if you don't give it to them, and if I tell Mike, and I should have been telling Derek,
Yeah.
that this can be just ignored.
Yeah. We can just
You have to tell the architect so they can put it in writing.
I think that's probably one of the wisest things that we've offered. Do things the right way, so nobody has a chance to go, you didn't tell me. I didn't know that. And I don't think people do that maliciously all the time, but if you don't know, you don't know. And we're all busy and we all forget. Another good reason to write it down. So, okay.
You got to make sure you don't overstep, stay in your lane. So let's say the fine arts director is the one that's given a lot of input. The school district may not want you being the point person communicating with the architect. You might need to report it to the operations superintendent, or to the principal, or to the superintendent, depending on how the district is running it. Stay in your lane.
Mm-hmm.
So know when to push and when to back off. And sometimes the answer might be no.
Yeah.
I gotta say,
It's the
and
three
don't pa-
T's: timing, tact, and tone. Ask them at the right time with the right tone,
but I'm
with the
I'm
right
gonna
tact.
repeat what I think I just heard, Mr. Lester. And I think it's important to say that this needs to be established kind of up front. Don't wait till you're in the middle of a project before you start trying to figure out who to talk to. But understand there is a chain of command and or a chain of administration. Follow the chain. Don't make waves, and you're probably going to enjoy the process more than. And listen, this is the way I'd say, and don't pout about stuff that doesn't happen the way you want it to. It's one thing to say this is important. It's one thing to say, no, you don't understand. This is really important. No, you don't understand. This is really, but if the answer is no, at some point, be thankful for what you did get and let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the phrase, that person's not happy unless they're miserable?
I think that's part of the syllabus of most music education.
Yeah. Life's too short.
Yeah.
I agree.
Be happy about
agree.
what you have.
Yeah.
Blessed and thankful.
You give them a fistful of $100 bills, they'll complain because it's wrinkled.
But my other point of that is what you're getting still how much percentage wise phenomenally better than what you've been in then yay, let's
Welcome.
go have a good day. But so there's a balance, I guess, of this is what I really want and really think we need. And then once the plans are set, you go, all right, this is what we got. Let's go. Okay, sir. I'm going to open it up to you one, just kind of free time for you, Mr. Lester. If you want to rehash, give us our walkaways from the director side of it and from the administrator side of it, and we'll call it good.
Sure. So, Mike, did y'all talk about things to ask for, like chair and stand cart storage and places like that?
Yes.
You've already covered that.
Yes, sir.
You've covered offices, percussion room, ensemble room, all the different
Mhm.
spaces.
Yep.
Ice machines.
And
golf-
doors and garage doors and
Yeah,
don't have too much curving on the outside in the load dock. And
absolutely.
so,
Places
And make
to
sure your
load.
ceiling height isn't compromised by truss.
yeah, who's metal trusses in the band hall. But yeah, we took care of the logistics. We definitely wanted from you that aspect of how you see it from the administrator viewpoint from that,
I would plan for loading and unloading as far as nowadays with semi trucks or other trailers.
some have 2 semis.
Yeah, no kidding. Just being able to get in and out of, and even bus loading.
Yeah. And how that affects your acoustics in the band hall. I've seen them install garage doors and it's just wind coming through and rattling and,
I would not recommend putting a roll up door that opens right into a
Right.
rehearsal space.
but I've seen that, haven't you?
It works great for about a week,
Yeah.
and then the wind starts blowing and
Especially in our part of the world.
yeah, no kidding. The wind blows and you hear that nonstop.
Yeah. Just constant. You
And-
can't even record your band anymore.
And they, the gears and the pulleys, they tend to wear out and break, and the motors, if you get a motorized one,
Yeah.
just be prepared for it. I'd put double doors or big 4-foot doors wherever I could put them.
Yeah.
First, and not put in roll up doors. I mean, I've seen them on the backs of stages and things that really didn't have a purpose.
Yes.
That's just what they put up, and they're very expensive.
Yeah.
Those roll up doors are high. I think you've got everything. I looked at my list here. I think that
These were the others.
you know,
Yeah.
covered everything. The one thing I don't know if you talked about or not was make sure you hire somebody that knows something about sound.
Yeah.
Acoustics.
Yeah.
You've got sound
Acoustician, is that what it's called?
an acoustician. There's BAI is a group that we use out of Austin a lot. They do both sound systems and acoustics of facilities. And they've got degrees in that. They know what they're talking about. That a lot of it has to do with volume, had some of its deflection of sound. So you'll see these unusual pyramids that hang from the ceiling or barrel shape. And then those same types of things are on the wall mixed with sound absorption. And they're trying to figure out, based on whether you have sheetrock or cinder block, how much they need to kill to
Mhm.
make the noise reduction in the room exactly right
Yeah.
in the decay.
And down to our band hall where it was not even built squared.
At
None of the walls were directly in front of each other. You can tell it by looking.
the
And
band,
sound wise, you can hear it.
the
Doesn't
one
go
that-
whoosh, 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 whoosh.
yeah, the Madison and Mann, the side wall
Right.
and the back wall,
It's built like a
nothing's
like a
parallel.
rhombus. Yeah, it's built like a rhombus on the floor plan.
They're not parallel at all.
Yeah.
And that if you don't, you get what's called bounce. And that's where you can clap in an empty room and it go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want that. So it's easy to cant the walls.
Yeah.
And I remember that first meeting, the architect said, "Are you sure you," or the
Yeah.
general contractor,
Yeah. This is a measure.
wall is 18 inches off over here. You can't tell it just from looking.
They're trying to fix it.
Yeah. It's important to consider the acoustics.
Yeah.
Consider sight lines.
Mm-hmm.
I always put in there, where are we going to store the sousaphones, tubas? Are they going to get lockers? Are they going to get hooks on the wall? Have a plan for that. Because
Yes.
if you don't have-
Everything you use has to have a place.
Again, we're probably stressing it too much. I just wanted to make sure that the people listening had an opportunity to hear from a former administrator, or
I learned a lot today. Even
They're-
if it's just Jay.
It's actually a team. It's actually a team effort. It's not like they're sitting there waiting to go, let me see that list, just to start striking stuff. But we do remember that it is a finite amount of money. It is a finite amount of resource. So we all work together to get the best and most for the amount that we have been allocated. And in the end result, and I've seen some of the facilities, it is fun to be proud of it at the end, and for everybody to be able to sit down and go, that's a job well done. So, well, sir, if you think of anything else, please don't hesitate to contact us. We have learned in this process that there's a lot of people actually considering. You mentioned the folks out at Wiley. I know that they're getting ready to do some of that as well, but anything that you go, oh yeah, let us know and we'll make sure we pass that along at some point in the future. We appreciate you and your time. I know you're a busy guy. Hope that your new semester is going to be awesome and exciting, and that, whatever it is you get planned over there at Hardin Simmons, I hope y'all are just greatly successful. So thanks,
Thank
my
you.
friend.
It's good to have you, Jay.
Talk to y'all soon.
See you, bud.